Welcome to another week of the Living Parsha. We're Parsha Toldot, and I'm going to go through the storyline. It's a very fascinating story and quite a interesting little sibling and parents disputes, which we'll get into this evening. So Toldot means generations of. We learn these are the generations, these are the children, descendants of Isaac and Rebecca. Yitzhak and Rivka, we discussed last week about their marriage, and this week we learn about their children. They had two sons, Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esav. And already from a young age, the Torah tells us the children were very different, even before they were born. So Rebecca, Rivka, is pregnant, and it says she's having a really hard time in her pregnancy, and she goes to seek counsel from God, which Rashi explains to us in the Midrash. She went to Shem, the elder, the Jewish elder. Wasn't Jewish. He was the spiritual elder at the time. We're on page 154 in this Chumash. And she asks Shem for what to do. Some commentaries even explain that actually Sarah was asking for Shem, can I abort? This is so difficult. To the point she says, if this is the struggle I go through, why am I even alive? She was really going through a hard time. And the Rashi again explains what was so difficult about her pregnancy. She felt two different forces within her. When she walked past a house of worship of God, she felt one side of her kicking. Something really excited when she went past an idol worship place that didn't accord with her faith. Another side of her was kicking, and she was confused. What's going on? And Shem tells her it's actually two children in your womb, and twins. They have very different personalities, but the younger one will rule over the older one. That's the prophecy she receives. Children are born, and Esav, the firstborn, comes out all hairy, and he's this wild child until he goes to hunt, like having a good time. Yaakov is described as a simple person, sits in tents, he sits and studies, he does everything right, he's going in the right direction. And they bring them up, these two children. We're told that Yitzchak, the dad, loved Esav in particular, whereas Rivka, Rebecca, loved Yaakov. We're not told why. Then we're told that when Yitzchak got old and his time to pass is coming closer, he wants to bless his children. He has the blessings from his father Abraham. He wants to hand over those blessings, which, as we learned last week, is actually the future of the Jewish people, right? Being part of the covenant of God, who's going to continue this spiritual legacy to his children. And he wants to give it to his oldest son, Esav. And he tells him, please prepare me some food. Come back here, I will bless you. Rivka overhears this and jumps into action. She says, no, the blessings must go to Yaakov. He's the one that is going to continue this legacy. Esav, I can't trust him with these blessings. And so she tells Yaakov, I want you to go to your father in the meantime and get the blessings. Because Yitzhak was actually blind. And so if you go there, he won't know who it is. Yaakov says, what if I'm found out? It's a huge risk. And Yaakov, we know, was a very simple, he was straightforward. This is not my character to go deceive my father, do, this spy work. And Rivka tells him, don't worry, it's on me. If he gets upset, it's on me. But Esav was very hairy. And so what she did was she took goat skins and covered Yaakov's arms and says, that way, if he feels your arms, he'll feel the hair, he'll think it's your brother Esav, and you fall. So Yaakov goes in, and he tells his father, it's me. And he uses language that's very deceptive. He said, it is I, Esav, your firstborn. Simply, you read that I am Esav, your firstborn. But Yaakov didn't want to outright lie, so he worded it in a way that can be read also differently. It is I, comma, Esav is your firstborn. So technically he didn't lie, even though he deceived his father. But his father Yitzchak was suspicious. Firstly, the voice sounded off. Secondly, he mentioned God. He says, thank God. He mentioned God's name. Esav never mentioned God's name. So he wants to make sure it's Esav. He feels his arms. Come here, come close, I want to feel you. And he feels the hairy arms, and he says these famous words, Hakol kol Yaakov. The voice is the voice of Jacob. Hayadayim idei Esav. The hands are the hands of Esav. But he gives him the blessings. Esav then comes back from his hunting expedition. He's prepared a meal for his father. He comes in to get the blessings. And Isaac tells him, you were here already. I already blessed you. And he realized what happened. He lets out this incredible cry, realizing the gravity of what just took place. He lost his blessings. His younger brother stole them. And he says, Dad, I'm sure you have some left for me. Please, anything, a blessing. So he blesses him with a separate blessing, with sort of more with material wealth. And when he says, when your younger brother, when Yaakov is down, you will have the ability to overwhelm him and be on top. But then Esav wants revenge. And so he wants to kill his brother Yaakov. And at this point, Rivka gets involved and says, we got to send Yaakov away. Save himself. And Yaakov runs away to his uncle Lavan, to Laban, where he ends up staying for over 20 years. He marries there, has children there, away from his family because he's afraid for his life. And that's the storyline from the Parsha this week. What I want to focus on is the main story, where two parents are undecided as to which child should be blessed, Yaakov and Esav. What was Rivka thinking? What was Yitzchak thinking? Why did each one want one of those children to get the blessings? And even so, strong with the question, why couldn't they speak to each other? Right?
Yitzchak and Rebecca?
Yeah. If Rebecca felt that Yaakov should get the blessings, she felt, Esav, this is a man, we can't trust this child. I can't empower him with the future of the Jewish people. It's going to be the end of the covenants. Go to her husband and say, listen, I think you're misjudging this. Have a conversation. To go behind his back and sneak Yaakov in doesn't sound like the proper thing to do. Is that ethical? So, what was going on over here? So let's go back a little and look at who these two children were. Yaakov and Esav. If you look in the plain reading of the text, we don't get much of an indication of Esav being a very bad person. The Midrash tells us all these different stories and translates the words of the Torah to explain that he was out murdering and doing all kinds of terrible crimes and involved in moral depravity. But it's not clear in the text. And in fact, we can suggest that Isaac may not have known about all of this. Isaac was older, he was blind, and it said he loved Esav. If you look at verse 28, it says, so the interesting thing, this Chumash we have has an interpretive translation. So it already gives you interpretation in the translation. The bold is the actual words, and the regular text is interpretation. So if you read the actual words 28, Isaac loved Esav for the gain he provided, literally in his mouth. So the simple reading is he loved him because he fed him food. The interpretation based on Rashi is he loved him because of the food, but also with his mouth, he actually fooled his father with words. Mm-hmm. And the Midrash says he would ask his father complex questions of halacha to fool him that he's a good kid. And meanwhile, when his father was unaware, he was going off doing all these terrible things. So it seems that he fooled his father into thinking he's a good kid when he wasn't really. That's the simple reading of this. And so then the story becomes very straightforward. Isaac was convinced Esav was a good kid. Rivka was a little more savvy, a little more aware of what's going on with their kids. And she knew that he wasn't. And maybe she was afraid to break Yitzchak's heart. Maybe she didn't want to dampen his love for his son. And so instead of telling him, you know what your son's really up to, she felt, instead of that, I will let him believe that, but let me somehow push Yaakov in.
What was he up to?
It's a good question. So if you look at verse 27, right? So it says that
What page is that?
page 157. So it says the boys grew. Esav became an expert in ensnaring his father into thinking he was exceedingly pious by asking clever questions. In reality, he was an undisciplined man who spent his time in the field hunting animals and birds. Right? In contrast, Jacob was a godless man, not planning to be anything he was not, went to live in the tents of Shem and Ever study Torah. Fast forward 29, and this is we'll get this in a second. So in the meantime, let's hold off a second. So the simple reading is that Yitzchak was unaware and Rivka was more savvy and she had to save the day. But it's hard to really, I think, square that. Was Yitzchak really so unaware? A patriarch, Isaac, had no brains in his head, couldn't figure out what was going on. It seems unrealistic. So maybe there's more to this, that Yitzchak knew who his son was, but despite that, wanted to give him the blessings. So the question is, two big questions I want to address. One, did Rivka and Yaakov do the right thing? And how is it right ethically to steal the blessings? And secondly, why wouldn't Rivka have told Yitzchak and had a discussion and convinced him? So as far as the right thing, there is one little incident in the Parsha I didn't mention yet. And that's in verse 29. The kids are in their early teens, 13 or 15, and their grandfather had passed away, Abraham. And the family was sitting Shiva. It's customary at a Shiva house to make lentil soup, because lentils are round and they symbolize a circle of life. And so it says that Jacob was cooking up a lentil soup for the family, and Esav came back from the field when he was hunting, right? And he was exhausted. Now, what was Esav doing in the fields? It doesn't say in the text. It says he came back from the field and he was ayef, he was tired. Rashi, quoting from the Midrash, says this term, tired, we have in the Torah many times, or a few times, referring to a few different acts. There's a verse which refers to someone as tired from killing, from murder. There's a verse where it's said in other contexts as well. So he wasn't just hunting. He was doing much more than that. Torah is hinting to us that Esav came back to the Shiva home, to his family, from the field in his work clothes, but he came back from not good places. And he comes home, he's tired and extremely hungry. He tells Yaakov, give me this soup. And what he actually says, pour the soup in my mouth. Like he literally just pour the soup in my mouth. And Yaakov says, 1 second, what are you going to give me in return? And he says, what do you want in return? So Yaakov says, I want the birthright. The firstborn privilege you have, sell to me for this soup. And Esav says, what do I need this birthright for? Of course. And they make this exchange, he gives him soup. What was the birthright he was selling? What was the firstborn privilege that he sold to Jacob here?
Blessings?
Possibly the blessings. Would they have known their father was going to bless them? We don't know. So some commentaries say that in Jewish law, if there's no will and the estate goes to the children, the firstborn gets a double portion of the estate by default, unless the parents write a will to allocate it equally. The firstborn child gets double portion. So there's a sort of financial benefit for being the firstborn. is assumed to be a responsibility the firstborn has to take care of the family. That's why they get double. Another possibility is that later on in Jewish history, the firstborns were going to be the ones to serve in the temple. It was meant to be every family would have a representative to do the service in the temple, the firstborn. Until the sin of the golden calf, where everyone sinned except the tribe of Levi, the Levites, God said, you know what? I'm stripping the firstborns of their privilege. The tribe of Levi and the Kohanim, they're going to represent the people to serve in the temple. But until that point, it was meant to be the firstborns. So the Midrash says, Yaakov says, give me the privilege of serving the temple. And Esav says, sure, what do I need this for? I don't want that. And so he was very quick to give it away. But whatever the case is, there was some transaction here. But whatever right Esav had as a firstborn, he legally sold to Yaakov for a pot of soup. Right? Now, we don't know if Rebecca knew about this. We don't know if Isaac knew about this. I'm assuming they didn't. Maybe they did. But there was some technical legal basis for Yaakov, for Jacob, to steal his blessings. With the claim, I actually acquired the firstborn right from Esav. But again, that begs the question, then why not have the conversation? Tell Isaac, oh, you want to give the firstborn a blessing? By the way, we actually made a deal, and I'm now the firstborn. So there must be something deeper here, why Isaac is insistent on giving the blessings to Esav, and for some reason, Jacob and Rebecca are hesitant to share with him truth, and they have to do it through deceit.
A lot of miscommunication in that family.
It seems that way, right?
It does.
The truth is, it may very well be that they did speak and they didn't agree, right? We don't know for sure there was a miscommunication. It could be that everyone was on board, Rebecca and Isaac had it out, and Isaac says, I don't care, I believe, and she says, I believe this. But there's no indication that in the text. So it does seem to be some kind of communication gap that wasn't being shared, but I think there must be a reason for it, right? We know Rebecca from last week was this kind person, generous. She wasn't this conniving, sly woman, right? So it's almost out of character for her to go ahead with this, deceive her husband, to have a child, go behind her husband's back to get something at the expense of her own son, so the other twin. There seems to be a backstory here, something we're missing that can explain what really went on over there. So let's go back a little further even. When Rebecca was pregnant, right, the story started that she went to find out what's going on. Why is she having all these difficulties in her pregnancy? Now, if you were Rebecca, your husband is Isaac. Your father-in-law, who's still alive at this point, is Abraham. If you wanted to find out what's going on, to seek God's counsel, why not go to one of them? Why is she going to this old rabbi somewhere else to find out what's going on? Any guesses?
When you say an old rabbi, you said he wasn't even Jewish.
Well, there weren't Jews technically at that time, right? Where he was a man of God. Okay. So technically, I guess the same way Abraham was a Jew, he would be considered a Jew in that sense. He was definitely he was a godly person. But you had Abraham at your disposal, right?
Yeah.
So according to the commentary that says she was sort of asking if she would let her abort, makes kind of sense. She was, to ask Isaac, he may not, his son, his kids, he may not be so forgiving here. Rather go to an impartial person and see, where do I stand here? Is there room for abortion? Which he advised obviously against. But the So the mainstream way of looking at this is that she was actually asking what's going on. Why would she go to an outside person? So we don't know for sure why, what. But again, it seems to point to the fact that the communication, maybe, she didn't want to burden her husband with this. This was her issue, not Isaac's issue, not Abraham's issue. She felt whatever's going on, it's up to me to deal with. Right? And Shane tells her, you have twins? One's going to be good, one's going to be bad, or drawn towards, negative things. But both going to be big nations. Did she then tell this to Isaac? No. This is big news, right? This is like, imagine someone told you when you're pregnant, what's going to be with your child, a fortune teller. And like 2 nations coming out of you, and the younger one will overwhelm the older one. And this is big news. Did she communicate this to Isaac? It doesn't seem so, because that clearly says that Jacob, the younger one, is meant to be the more important one, the one that carries the chain of whatever legacy that Abraham gave over to Isaac. That's the prophecy she got. So if she had told it to Isaac, he wouldn't have chosen Esav. So she maybe didn't tell him, which then again might make sense. If she would tell him, it's like, why did he come to me? Like, almost like at that time when she went somewhere else, now she feels bad telling Isaac, like, oh, I went behind your back to a different rabbi to ask him, and this is what he said, right? And even 15 years later, 20 years later, 60 years later, when it comes to the blessings, imagine her telling you, by the way, when our kids were born, I actually went to a rabbi, a prophet, and he told me this. Really? And you never told me? Right? That becomes a little touchy to bring it up now. So she knew, with the power of the prophecy, that Jacob is meant to be the one to get these blessings. We understand, I think Rebecca's position we understand very well. Jacob's a good kid. He seems to have what it takes to be the future. And she has this prophecy from when she was pregnant that Jacob is going to be the one, the younger one is going to be the one that's going to have the power, have the blessings. So Rebecca had a very clear sort of moral clarity. She had a very strong position here, staked out. We understand her 100%. Let's try to understand Isaac. He has a son, Esav. Now, Esav, I would say, is a classic child that doesn't fit into the system, right? A kid doesn't really, school doesn't work for them. Their home life, they're rebelling against something. Now, no kid is bad, right? If a kid's rebelling or not fitting in, because they're different. And whatever it is that the system is giving them, the structure, isn't working for them. And so they're looking for ways out of it. And often when the more you push or the more you try to box them into the system, the more they're going to fight against it and rebel. And so this rebellious kid doesn't mean they're not good. In fact, often it means they have more energy, more talent than the disruptors. And channeled the right way, there can be something really incredible, right? A misfit, a kid that doesn't fit into the classic system, all you need to do maybe is give them different opportunities. And then they can be more successful than the child that just does everything right and everything works for them. So Esav was this kid that from the get-go was different to his family, different to the Abraham, Isaac, the household he was growing up in, and he never fully fit in. But perhaps Isaac recognized this. He was well aware, but he saw in this an incredible potential to do something that has never been done before, right? To disrupt something, to bring an energy to the world that's going to change the universe. Just to go the straight and narrow, the safe route, is only going to get so far. If we can get Esav on board, if we can channel this energy of Esav, this could be something really incredible, very powerful. So perhaps his love for Esav wasn't because he was unaware of what's going on, but he was well aware, and he saw in his own child a potential that if it's harnessed correctly, it can be even more powerful than Jacob will ever be. It can do even more good than Jacob will ever be able to do. Think about it in political terms. You have a country that's doing things, terrible things, right? Or a threat. So one way of dealing with this country is shutting up diplomatic ties, sanctioning them, pushing back, having very strong hands. There's another school of thought that says, 1 second, maybe if we're nice to them, maybe if we give them what they want I can bring them around. Maybe we'll be able to convince them to come on board and shift, right? And these are two schools of thought. Often, we need a bit of both. But definitely the safer bet is going to be to shut it down, right? In the short term, for sure. And often it's almost naive to think that you can really, through showing kindness, through opening doors, you're going to change them around. But Isaac saw this in his son. He says, right now he's on the wrong track. But I see this energy he has. There's something here that if I can show him love, if I can give him, embrace him, I can turn him around. But Rebecca felt it's too risky, right? What's the risk? The risk is the whole future of the Jewish people, which is the future of the world, the universe. We're entrusted with a mission to make this world a better place, to be God's ambassadors in this universe, and to hand that to Esav, hand that spiritual power to. He could go wild. He can go rogue. He could ruin the whole project. So even though there was sort of value she saw to what Isaac was trying to do, this is not going to be without risk and very likely unsuccessful.
And these same issues continue to this very day in so many aspects of life. This is a basic question. What do you do when somebody doesn't toe the line and resists? And how do you best deal with how much can love do and understanding do? And are they limited? Wow.
Yes, this is we face it in our own lives, our own children, in school, classrooms, in society. How much do you embrace people to hope that you rehabilitate them, versus say, hey, you're a danger, I'm gonna push you away, put you behind bars. I have to discipline you, I have to shut you down. So there's this constant tension, and almost no easy answer, because both sides of the coin have value, both are true. One maybe is more hopeful versus pragmatic, but they both have space. And in certain instances, both have been proven correct. One's definitely the safer way, one maybe has a bigger vision. You don't create change by being safe, right? No one has ever started a revolution by towing the line. So this is the debate going on in the house to Isaac and Rebecca. And if we go back to last week, actually, he discusses that Isaac was Yitzchak, the future tense. His was a very long-term vision of in the future of laughter, right? Of the messianic era. We're setting roots now for what to come. And in the Chassidus, it explains that the ultimate goal, sort of why we're here, is to reach a point where Esav comes around. We say that the pasuk says, "Va'alu Moshiach b'Har lishpot har Esav." Times the Mashiach will reach the Mount Zion and the mountain of Esav. I mean, there'll be some sort of Esav and his descendants will come around. And the idea is our mission here is not to shut the world down and everything that doesn't agree with us to push it away, but to embrace the world and make the world a better place, even the Esavs of the universe. And so Isaac had this sort of wild idea. Let's take Esav and give him the blessings, and this is going to the whole world will be captured in this rapture, in this spiritual covenant we have with God. And Rebecca, who's much more living in the here and now, the pragmatist, says, we're not ready for this. Like, it's a beautiful utopian goal, right? I love the vision, but if we do this now, as if we're there, it causes chaos. I would love to embrace every single human being for their individuality, and no matter who they are, what they espouse, show them love. But it's going to create chaos. You're going to have crime. You have to have, right now, we're living in an imperfect world, we have to have boundaries. So yes, my goal is that we don't have these boundaries, and everyone, even Esav, we're not there. It's a process.
So one wants a strong border wall with Mexico, and the other one says, no, let him in. We'll take care of him.
Possibly, right? It's one maybe application of this debate.
Yeah.
But it has resonance in so many areas of life. This tension between Isaac and Rebecca, whether to embrace Esav, and not only embrace him, give him the blessing specifically. Charge him with the most important mission, because that will inspire him to come around. Which Rebecca says, whoa. This is a little premature. We're not ready for this yet. Esav isn't ready for this yet. This is risky business. So that's the household tension here. But it also gives you insight. When we say, Esav is this bad kid and Yaakov is a good kid, that's very simplistic. Yaakov was a straightforward person. Ishtam, simple person, not simple, it's straightforward. He was like on the straight and narrow, that, getting good grades in school, just doing what he had to do. Esav was the complicated child. He was not fitting the mold. Is that good or bad? It could be really bad. It has incredible potential for good as well. Like a nuclear force, right? It can be destructive, but also be incredibly powerful, depending on how you harness it. The question is, was they ready to harness Esav? Or was Esav ready to be harnessed? So we have now Yitzchak, hell-bent on giving Esav the blessings, and Rivka thinking this is danger to the whole entire future, the whole project, the whole Judaism. And so they both have very strong opinions there. And with potential immense consequences. So how do we manage this? So whether Rivka told Isaac or not, we don't know. Possibly she told him her opinion. But definitely in the text, it doesn't seem to be that way. Like I said, it seems to be there was no communication between them, and they didn't discuss this. Instead, she had Jacob, go through with this deceit. So let's understand that now. Why the deceit? So if they argued it out, and Isaac refused to give in, so then maybe she had no choice but to, in the 11th hour, push Jacob through the door. But if she didn't, then she never even tried. Why would she opt for deceit in the first place instead of communication? And what's the right thing? So some commentaries say, you know what, if she would have tried to communicate with Isaac and had it out, and then Isaac says, no, I want to give it to Esav, then it would be really bad to sneak Yaakov in the door. We discussed this, I said no, and then you sneak him in, that's like, oh. Here, it's like, whatever, we didn't, I'll sneak him in. And the truth is, after Isaac gives Jacob the blessing and Esav comes in, Yitzchak, Isaac says, I must have done the right thing. If this is what happens, Jacob actually should get the blessings. So it seems he himself knew that maybe Jacob should get them. So there's something here. But before I get into that, I wanted to share something interesting. History is written by the victors, right? So we always look at it, Jacob did the right thing, we're his descendants, and he saved the history, he saved the Jewish people, and this deceit was the ends justify the means, right? We have to get this future, and the only way to do it was through deceit, and therefore the ends justifies whatever it took, even deceiving his father. But there is actually indication in the Torah that Jacob was punished, was held accountable for deceiving his father. And I want to share 3 interesting little indications we have in the text. Number 1, what does Jacob need to do in response to this? He has to run away to his uncle Laban. And he gets to his uncle, he sees his cousin Rachel, Rachel, and he wants to marry her. He tells Laban, I want to marry your daughter. He says, sure, work for me for 7 years, you'll have my daughter. You can marry her. So he works for 7 years, and he gets ready to, have a wedding. He's married to Rachel, and Laban switches on him, and without him noticing, he wakes up in the morning, it says, and instead of Rachel, there was Leah. It was a sister. Laban had given the older sister to him as a wife instead of the younger sister. This is in the future Parshas. And Yaakov is up in arms. He goes to his uncle. Laban says, well, you deceived me. We had a deal, and you tricked me. And Laban tells him the words. It's interesting, it's the words inside. Look at page 181. Verse 26, the bottom of the page. So Yaakov had asked him, what do you do to me? Lavan replied, I'm not denying you, Rachel. It is just in our region, established practice of forbids getting younger daughter in marriage before the older. It's simply not done here. And so some commentaries say, Lavan was actually chastising him. He says, over here, we don't give the younger before the older. They're telling Yaakov, I know what you did, that you, the younger, took the blessings from the older. But over here, we're honest. Over here, the older comes first. And so almost Yaakov having to marry the wrong person. He eventually marries Rachel as well, but having to marry Leah was almost a consequence, almost like Lavan was getting him back for taking the blessings of Esav. That's one thing. His suffering, his challenge he went through later in life was the consequence. Even later in the Torah, Yaakov suffers a very tragic affair when his son Joseph is sold by his brothers into Egypt, right? In slavery in Egypt. The brothers don't want their father to know what they did. So they took Joseph's coat, they slaughtered a goat, and they took the blood on the coat. They said, oh, we found our brother's coat. He's dead, must be dead. And for over 20 years, he thinks his son's dead, until he finally meets him back in Egypt. The commentaries point out something very interesting. The goat, Jacob used a goat to cover his skin to deceive his father. His children used the goat to deceive him. And so again, there's kind of inference by the similarity that he's suffering later from his own son, Joseph, missing, his children deceiving him, was somehow midah k'neged midah, a tit for tat, quid pro quo, for his deceiving his father.
But was it not also that the other siblings were jealous that one son, the youngest, right, was a favorite of the father of Jacob?
Yes.
And they were jealous, and they didn't want, like, they wanted the father's attention. The father never gave them the same attention that he would give the youngest son.
Yeah.
So it's similar to what he had going on with his son.
That's right. His mother favored him, and therefore he deceived his father with the goat. He favored Joseph, and they deceived him with the goat. So that it comes around to bite him. And so almost an inference where Jacob maybe did the right thing, but he wasn't totally right. He suffered because of what happened.
What comes around goes.
Exactly. So he wasn't totally justified. It seems to be that he wasn't totally justified. There's one more very interesting reference, which comes from the Megillah Esther, the story of Purim. And the Megillah tells us that when Mordechai hears about the decree that Haman wrote up against the Jewish people, the words are, Vayizak, and he screamed, Za'aka g'dola umara, a great and bitter cry. The exact same words which we have Esav screaming in response to finding out that Jacob stole his blessings. So if you look at verse Verse 33. It's in the bottom of 166 under the Hebrew text.
166?
Yeah, verse 34, sorry. 166 under the Hebrew text in the English a little bit. When Esav heard his father's words, he let out an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, to father." So that same exact expression that Esav let out a bitter and strong cry is the expression of Mordechai that Megillah uses for Mordechai, which again leaves the commentary to suggest that Jewish suffering later on was somehow seen as a response in some spiritual way. Obviously, Haman didn't know it wasn't, but Mordechai's cry mirrors Esav's cry. So the Jewish people suffer something because Jacob made his brother suffer.
I'm sorry, where is it?
166, verse 34.
Like
in the middle section is the English.
Okay.
So verse 34, let out an exceedingly great and bitter cry. You see it there?
No.
166.
166.
Yeah, sorry.
Now I see it. Thank you.
So what we have here is that Jacob was not fully vindicated. The ends may have been good, but the means to get there, it's something wrong. So there was something going on over here. Somehow, something went that he had to break through something and do something to get these blessings. So I want to suggest two explanations as to why it had to be this way. One explanation is that is given is that sometimes the deepest blessings have to come through irregular channels. And so we look throughout Jewish history, there are a lot of strange stories, specifically when it comes to the most profound blessings. For example, says that King David, and eventually Mashiach, is descended from Ruth. A complicated story of she was a Moabite convert. Some says Moabites couldn't convert, and so she converts. Who does Ruth come from? Moab. We had in the Parsha a couple weeks ago. Lot, who after we ran away from Sodom, his two daughters thought that the only people left in the world. They said we have to have a child through our father, or else there'll be no more humanity. And that strange cohabitation, that strange conception, is the origins of Ruth and then King David and Mashiach. Sometimes the only way blessings come into this world is the way we kind of imagine. Put it very simply, when you go to work and you I can make this amount of money. There's only a certain amount of money you can make, right? I put in the effort, I have this. The returns I get are going to be commensurate to the effort I put in and the potential that is there. To get a total fortune that is not commensurate to your work, something has to happen that isn't the regular, right? Has to come from left field. That's the only way it's going to work. Having a 9-to-5 job, you're not going to make $1 billion. You could disrupt something, innovate something, or even something comes your way you never expected, a windfall. So sometimes a blessing that's so deep and profound can't just come through regular channels. Our regular channels are too limited. And so the blessing that Jacob was getting, which is going to be the future of the Jewish spiritual mission of the world, just by giving them to him, would never be able to convey the entirety of it. Someone had to come through deception. We don't really deserve it. And what he's getting is not really, I didn't know I was giving it to him. And that way, the blessings coming through this roundabout way are able to contain something much more profound.
Isn't that a little bit the story of the Jewish people in general? Like
Yeah.
Our path is never straight and easy. It's always difficult and obstacles, and have to overcome difficult times and all these things.
Right. Yes.
We're in it right
If
now.
it'd be easy and straightforward, right? We'd be good people and do good. And we don't understand even what's going on. we're in right now, right? It's a crazy time. Things are going on, which we can't imagine. Why? No one has answers to why. And there's so much challenge to overcome, so many things thrown our way, and we have to navigate. But when we retain our faith, even in this dark period, when we maintain our strength and conviction, even when so much is stacked against us, there's something much more powerful and profound in our Jewish identities, in our Jewish unity that's born out specifically through this, having to snake our way through this history. So yeah.
Can I say something else?
Yeah, sure.
So I grew up in Germany, right? And there I always had, the Holocaust and everything very much present in my life. Anti-Semitism was always very present, but it was under the radar. It wasn't like now where it's like out and about, right? And I feel like now living in the US, I always felt like Jewish people in the US, I feel like there are not many people that grew up like I did. I'm not ultra-Orthodox, but I'm also not, I feel like there's a lot of Jewish people here that are, I like to call them Jews on paper. Like they're Jews, but they don't really live very Jewish, you know what I mean? And now it was a little bit of a wake-up call for some of these people who all of a sudden realized or discovered, oh yeah, wait a minute, I'm Jewish. Now they all of a sudden feel a need to maybe navigate back to, it's not become ultra Orthodox tomorrow, but to, go back a little bit to the roots and, the identity and all these things. And they start doing a little bit more than they were doing up until this point, for example.
What made them do that?
Because they see what's happening. Whether you are a
Because
Jew
the
who is an
current
Orthodox
political-
Jews, yeah, or you are a Jew who does not live a Jewish life at all, in their eyes, you're a Jew. Doesn't matter. So it's almost like I might as well go back and
And I think
remember where I come from. And
more
what
than
my
might
roots
as well.
are.
I think a lot of people felt like, why do I care so deeply?
Why what?
Why do I care so deeply?
Yes.
Because being Jewish actually means more to me than I knew it did, right?
Yeah.
It does.
It's like they forgot.
Yeah, because life's easy. So like, yeah, you do what you need to do. But it hits you that it's actually real. Yes, absolutely. This creates this, and for all of us on our levels, right? There's like 1 second, like I have to be more than I am right now. There's a calling here, and it brings Jews together in ways we haven't been together, and brings so many Jews right out of that like complacency and saying, I need to connect this more, and we're seeing that. Incredible.
Where we grew up much more like traditional, so we kept the holidays, I only went to Jewish school up to 4th grade, then there was no continuing Jewish school back then. So I had to go to public school, but we continued doing like Jewish religion classes until I graduated high school. And part of that was going to the synagogue every Friday evening, right? So we were much more like involved, and we had Jewish youth programs, this and that, and we were always this very tight-knit Jewish community. When I came to the US, I'm like, there is so many people. It's like either you're ultra-Orthodox or it's like you do nothing.
You're kind of lost, right?
And I don't, until today, I really have a hard time finding people that are like me, It's like either or. And I'm happy to see that there's a lot of people that were doing not much up until now are finally doing more than what they were doing up until this point.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in their own way are finding more ways to connect and to grow. Yes. 100%.
And even feeling like they have a need to now continue the message to their children, because a lot of children were very like not connected at all.
Right.
And those especially that have younger children are all of a sudden like, oh, I think I need to teach my children this and that, and they need to understand we're Jewish.
Right.
And Chabad is helping.
We do what we can. No, I understand. And I think a lot of people also didn't realize like it's not going to pass on automatically. Right? Once you feel I'm Jewish, my kids will. It won't pass on to the kids unless you make an effort, educate them, have Shabbat at home, go to the holidays. If you don't make an active effort to engage in Jewish life, I mean, so many people like, why are my kids not marrying a Jew? Well, why should they? You never gave them anything like a positive Jewish sense. It takes effort. If you're not living it, then what are you expecting them? So 100%, we have to, each and the truth is, I look in the mirror. Sometimes we all have to grow in how much we're giving to ourselves, to our children. It's something which is a constant. What am I doing more, and what can I do more? Because we all have to be stronger. Yeah.
I think actually, Tali, you have some Jewish friends that don't know much about Judaism, right? like they're Jewish, but
They know the external things like the latkes and Hanukkah,
Right.
but
Then that's it.
beyond that level,
That's your job, right? To engage them. Obviously, in ways that can, but like that's we all have this purpose and mission to help other people connect, especially now.
Yeah.
So that's the first sort of way of understanding why Rebecca felt that for Jacob's blessings she couldn't do it, tell Isaac, and go. There had to be something a little bit roundabout, and that's the way she's going to affect deepest blessings. Another idea that I think is very beautiful, and it comes from Yitzhak Meir Alter, the first Ger Rebbe. Gur is one of the biggest Hasidic groups, and the first leader in the early 19th century. It was a Rebbe in Poland, and he said something very beautiful. He said, "We all have within us Jacob and Esav, right? We have a altruistic side, wants to do the right thing, just wants to be on board, live for a purpose. We have also our Esav. I want to enjoy myself, have pleasure, to ego, even hurting others because that would help me. It's this very materialistic, ego-driven side, and we have that Esav. Some people, their Yaakov is more pronounced, and their Esav is more at bay. Some people, their Esav is very wild, and Yaakov is always hidden, right? But and as Jews, we have that tension, right? I want to be a good Jew, but also I want to enjoy life. And I have this battle, this tension between these two sides of self. Yaakov and Esav. Yitzchak, Isaac said, I want people to embrace every part of their being, even the Esav. And that Esav should be brought on board as part of the spiritual journey. Rebecca said, how are you going to do that? By pumping up the Jacob, right? Focus on the good, be good, and eventually everything will come around. They had this tension between them, right? Do we address the Esav, or do we highlight the Jacob? And that's the way of. But he says the ultimate realization is to each of us to know that who's our true identity? Who are we really at heart, at our core? We're all Jacob. The Esav is an external self. It's a very sort of shallow self, surface. Yes, it feels good to have things and material pleasures, but they don't really make us fulfilled. Deep down, they're not really what makes us who we are. Who are we really? We find meaning in helping people, right? We find purpose in doing the right thing and being part of something greater than ourselves. We're really Jacob. But we have this almost external layer of Esav. Now, listen to this is a beautiful teaching he says. He says, if Isaac or Rebecca would have had this conversation and says, you know, who deserves the blessings? Jacob. That would basically say, there's no place for Esav at that table. Only Jews that are living a Jacob life, they're the Jews. If you're not on board, you don't belong here. No blessings for you. You're not part of our family. Instead, they have to give the blessings to a Jacob who's dressed in Esav's clothes, who has the external trappings of Esav. Is Jacob who seems outwardly like Esav. That's who Isaac gives blessings to, which is a symbol of a Jew who internally is Jacob, but even if externally we're living lives of Esav, even if we're acting in ways that mimic Esav, and we're living a very materialistic and a very ego-driven life, we still belong. There's still space for us. There's still potential hope. There's still a Jew. And so to give Esav, that's not appropriate. We have to realize that we're all really Yaakov. But to only give Yaakov is to say, well, there's no place for Esav. Instead, it's going to give to Yaakov dressed in Esav's clothes. And that's going to be a symbol for Jews throughout history and Jews today. That each one of us, first of all, has an neshama, a soul, where inside we're all Jacob. So recognize that even if you see him on the outside, you feel a person, they feel like Esav, they feel rough, they feel disconnected. Know that that's just an external layer. That's just the skin you're feeling. They put on these goat skins. Who are they really? Inside, they're pure, beautiful people. They're Jacob. And also to know we can embrace those people too. They are part of the Jewish people. The blessing that Isaac gave his children, include us, is to all of us. No matter how much we know about Jacob, or how much the clothes of Esav has overwhelmed our external appearance and our behavior, we too are blessed, too part of the Jewish people. No Jew is too far gone, because there's always a Jacob within the clothes of Esav. And that gives incredible hope to us and a perspective. Saying before, Judah seemed disconnected. It only seems. No Jew is more Jewish than any other Jew, or less Jewish. And so you can call a Jew on paper, they're 100% Jewish. Whether they're acting that way or not is a different story. But we have to embrace them and share with them, because we have to bring out the Jacob. But even if it seems like they're Esav's clothes, you have to realize they are also Jacob. And so perhaps Rivka purposely fooled Isaac, that Isaac would give to something that seemed externally like Esav. But Rivka put the internal Jacob inside this clothing of Esav to give hope to the Jewish people, give us perspective going forward in Jewish history, that every single Jew, every single person has the Jacob within, and we have to see that, embrace that, and be able to bring it out within ourselves, within others. So that's one way, another way of resolving this story. And there's more, right? We can go home and think about it more, but it's an incredible, reading into this family dynamics, realizing there's much more to the story than just plain surface. Isaac had a perspective, Rebecca had a perspective, Jacob had a perspective. Who are they? Who was Esav? Who was Jacob? What do they mean to us? It's a whole world.
As I'm listening to this, we're sort of sketching out polar opposites. And so I try to put them on a different level. So first I thought, one is the kind of person who follows the rules, and then there's a person who breaks the rules. So that might be an appropriate tag for the two groups. But then I'm thinking, and I don't like it, to counterpoise good and evil. That doesn't seem right, to put those big labels on these two opposite points of view.
Right.
So it's not on that level.
So that's saying Isaac saw potential in Esav, didn't see his evil, right? There's potential for evil, right? Someone doesn't follow the rule, has a potential for evil, potential for discovery and breaking records because they don't follow the rules, right? So it's not necessarily evil, some which has to have guardrails, because it can definitely be transferred.
We're not on that level. It's evil. A different kind of.
But yeah, it also depends how you translate good and evil, right? What does good and evil mean?
What does
good and evil mean?
Right.
Right? It can mean so many different things depending which context you're using it in.
But I don't really see it as good and evil. I see it more as somebody who's very by the book and somebody who's ready willing to take risks. That's how I see it more.
Yeah, like yes, but that's the thing. Who is more sort of potential for evil? The person willing to take risks, because they know nothing holding them back. But on the other hand, if they're harnessed, they're going to be a much more powerful force of good than the person who's doing by the book.
Yeah, but it's also, the one who's the risk taker might have a bigger payout at the end of the day, right?
Yes. Can lose it all, or can make it all. Yes.
I have a very stupid question. I don't know if that has anything to do with that. Do we generally feel that it's in the Jewish DNA that